The Lord be with you. We're continuing our study of the Gospel according to St. Mark. We are at the end of chapter 10, and we read. We begin at verse 46. And they came to Jericho. That's Jesus and the disciples and a great crowd. And as he was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a great crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind beggar, son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside. And when he heard it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he cried out all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." And they called the blind man and said to him, "Take heart, get up, he is calling you." And throwing off his cloak, he sprung up and came to Jesus. And Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the blind man said to Jesus, "Rabbi, let me recover my sight." And Jesus said to him, "Go your way, your faith has made you well." And immediately he recovered his sight and followed him on the way. And this is the end of the gospel reading. So we find Jesus here. He's continuing. We're in Jericho, just outside of Jericho by the time we meet Bartimaeus, and he's on his way. He's on this journey. As you remember, we're going on our way toward Jerusalem. When we start chapter 11, the very next verse, we're going to hear the events of Palm Sunday, Jesus' triumphal entry into the city. And the last third of the gospel is going to be the Holy Week events, which really, has, at least, I think when I first kind of, not so much heard it, but kind of figured this out myself over time of reading the Gospels, all of the Gospels are like this. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Really, a third of their what the gospel writers give us, like Mark here, is this Holy Week event, which makes you understand very much how significant these 7-8 days plus that we're going to go through, 8 days including the resurrection of Jesus, are to the whole of the gospel, that this is the heart and the soul of the coming of the kingdom of God as we get into Jerusalem. But this is kind of Jesus' final event outside of, I guess, his going on the road into Jerusalem, but his final event before the beginning of Holy Week. Jericho is probably, as I have read, a day's walk from Jerusalem, so we're getting very close, not exactly the suburbs of Jerusalem, but kind of a very nearby city. This is the last of the miracles that Mark is going to record for us in his gospel. So in that way, it is fairly significant. It is the second of the two healing of blind men. We have to go back to, I think it's chapter 3, to find the previous healing of a blind man in that case. And so we do, but you get this image. Jesus is going toward Jerusalem. This momentum is building. It's Jesus. You kind of see, and especially the last account here, as the request that James and John about who will sit at your left hand, right hand. Jesus is in the front. It kind of describes there, which is kind of the position of the rabbi. He's going to be the head. He's the head of the line and his disciples. But then this great crowd continues to grow. There is a momentum that is building behind Jesus' journey to Jerusalem. What everybody expects is going to happen probably has nothing to do with what will actually happen. What they think Jesus is there to do is nothing to do with what he is expecting to do. And actually, if you had heard last Sunday's, which would have been the first Sunday of Advent, we did read the Mark 11 verses 1 through 13 that we're going to look at next in the next session, with Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. That was kind of the point we make. Everybody's probably anticipating he's coming there to destroy Herod or Pontius Pilate, or drive out the Roman centurions, or overthrow Caesar, or something along that line. But really, he's coming to do battle with forces of evil that are well beyond any momentary leadership of the world, or of Jerusalem, or of Israel, or of the Roman Empire. He's coming to destroy the authority of Satan over us and our sin and death itself. He's going to destroy. He's not coming to take a throne in a palace, but to take the throne that is the cross as he's taken out of the city. But beyond that, so we have this momentous crowd. They're building, and you can almost see Bartimaeus, kind of, this, and how they would hear his voice. It's almost like the woman who touches Jesus's robe, the hem of his garment, and he says, like, who touched me? And the disciples like, what do you mean, who touched you? There's a bazillion people here. And the same sort of thing's almost got to be happening here as well. All of a sudden, this one voice out of this great crowd is what Jesus hears. One guy yelling out to him. And what he yells, though, is very significant. He talks, both of his yelling out make the reference to, and I'm going to find, and he began to cry out, saying, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And then the second one, just a little bit down in verse 48, Son of David, have mercy on me. And this is the first time we have anyone use that title, Son of David, for Jesus, which is in part significant because, first of all, it brings us to understand that they seem to understand that Jesus is of the line of David, of the house of David. That he is born in Bethlehem would not have been a shock to anybody, because that is the city of David, and he is truly the heir to the throne of Israel. But also, and more significantly here, Jesus is the Christ, that title for I guess you would say, the first hearers of this gospel, the people who are gathered there, that he uses this title, Son of David, is a Christological title, that he is identifying Jesus as the Christ, which again, as we've kind of talked throughout the whole of this gospel, nobody else seems to get it. The number of people who seem to have any understanding, or number of beings, where really it always seems to be throughout much of the, whenever Jesus drives out a demon, he makes them silent. And they're saying things like, what do you want with me, Jesus of Nazareth? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. I mean, there's a Christological title as well, the Holy One of God. And so this is a Christological title. This beggar, this guy who sits on the side of the road and holds out his hands and makes his whole living, his whole life, from hoping that somebody will put something into his hand and see to it that he has food and that he has a place to sleep. This guy, of all the Pharisees and all the Sadducees and the disciples and everybody else who don't seem to get it, this guy does get it. But that is a Christological title. He is the Son of David. And Jesus calls him to himself. And there's a little bit of an exchange here. This is a disciple-like sort of conversation that goes on between Jesus and Bartimaeus. And but then, of course, he asks to have his sight received. Like I said, the very last time we're going to see a miracle of this sort, Jesus is healing or driving out a demon or cleansing of a leper sort of miracle that we're going to encounter in the Gospel of Mark. And we are going to but he asks to be healed, and Jesus heals him, and immediately he has his sight restored to him, and he follows him, which is kind of significant, I think, as well. So many of the other times, Jesus, when he heals somebody, what are the instructions almost every time? Tell no one, which actually, this is maybe, and as I think about it just in this moment, what does Jesus often do as well? He takes he takes people aside. He kind of gets out of the crowd and then heals, almost as though nobody's going to figure it out what I've done, because he's trying to hold the crowds back from getting more and more giddy by seeing a miracle. Jesus heals Bartimaeus in front of everybody, and he lets him follow him. Usually what he does is, even when there are those who have asked, let me follow you, the man who is when they go across to the Decapolis, remember that account, and the man is, what is your name? And he says Legion, which is to say there's just an outrageous number of demons who have possessed this man. And when he's healed and of his right mind, he says, Jesus, let me follow you, let me go, you're going away, I want to go with you. Jesus says, no, you have to stay. But now he welcomes this man. So Jesus really seems to be allowing, as we're getting close, a day away maybe, or 2 days away before he actually enters into Jerusalem on the Palm Sunday events, on a donkey and all those things that we'll talk about in our next session. He's letting the crowd grow this time. All the other times he seems to be frustrated by the crowd that doesn't let him go out and do his ministry and won't let him, kind of move freely about Israel or around Capernaum. And he now is allowing the crowds to come in, and we will then pick up where we have left off in our next session, and we will begin the events of Holy Week, which start with Jesus' triumphal entry and will be completed on that 8th day of Holy Week, the final perfect day of completion when Jesus will rise from the dead. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you, be gracious unto you. Lord, look upon you with favor and give you peace. Amen.